Hello there, welcome to this week's edition of World Panorama, a show that gives you a complete overview of all the big global news. I'm Ashwarya Kapoor with you. Let us start the program with the top stories this week in the headlines. Ashraf Ghani re-elected as Afghan president. Rival Abdullah challenges outcome, declares a parallel government. 7-day reduction in violence between US and Afghan Taliban begins. If successful, two sides to sign first phase of peace deal. Coronavirus claims 2,360 cases worldwide. Concern over spread in countries outside China. WHO says window of opportunity to control outbreak narrowing. Evacuations continue from Diamond Princess amid international criticism over Japan's handling of the outbreak on the ship. Father teaches a young daughter to laugh at bombs to help cope with Syrian war as government forces press ahead with offensive to push out rebel fighters from their last strongholds. Flare-up brings Russia and Turkey closer to direct conflict. Humanitarian crisis worsens. Libya's warring parties return to negotiations to salvage a fragile ceasefire. Tripoli-based government had earlier withdrawn from the US peace talks after attack by rival General Haftar's forces on Tripoli port. And East Africa battles devastating locust swarms. Food and Agriculture Organization says crisis threatens food security across region. Experts blame climate change for their phenomenal numbers. The top story this week. Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani has been declared the winner of last September's election. However, Ghani's key rival Abdullah Abdullah, who also happens to be Ghani's chief executive officer in the so-called National Unity Government, challenged the final outcome by declaring a parallel government. The results were repeatedly delayed, with the Election Commission citing technical issues, allegations of fraud and protests from candidates. Meanwhile, a 7-day reduction in violence between the US and the Afghan Taliban has begun. If successful, the two sides will then sign on 29th of February the first phase of a deal aimed at ending nearly 2 decades of conflict. Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani and his supporters all smiles as they gathered at the presidential palace on Wednesday, a day after the incumbent president was declared the winner of the election, almost 5 months after voting took place in September. Ghani dedicated his victory to Afghan people.
I
am dedicating this victory of the people to the people, and as the first servant, with our united team, we will always safeguard the rights of the Afghan people.
Ghani won 50.64% of the vote. Abdullah Abdullah, Ghani's former deputy and main rival, was named runner-up with 39.52% votes. The result echoes 2014, when both Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah alleged massive fraud by the other side, forcing the US to broker an awkward power-sharing agreement that made Ghani the president and Abdullah Abdullah his chief executive. The relationship has since been marred by distrust and a jostling for power in Kabul. This time too, Abdullah has rejected the results and proclaimed victory.
The result of the Independent Election Commission announced was the result of election robbery, a coup against democracy, the betrayal of the will of the people, and we consider it to be illegal. We announce our victory.
Polls were held on 28th of September, but the process was marred by allegations of rigging, technical problems with the biometric devices used for voting, attacks and other irregularities. Turnout was also the lowest since the Taliban were ousted in 2001. Out of 9.6 million registered voters, just 1.82 million votes were counted. Nearly 1 million votes were discarded due to irregularities. The election result comes at a time when the US is seeking to sign a peace deal with the Taliban, who refuse to negotiate directly with the Afghan government, saying it is illegitimate. The US and Taliban are due to sign an agreement on 29th of February that will lead to the withdrawal of thousands of US troops and the start of comprehensive peace talks between the Afghan government and the insurgents. The agreement would be signed once there has been a week-long nationwide reduction in violence that started at midnight on Friday, according to an understanding reached by the US and Taliban negotiators meeting in Doha.
Now that grounds for peace are in place, we have taken this opportunity to set forth our people's demand so that the Taliban accept the ceasefire and start negotiations. But now that the Taliban have agreed to a reduction in violence, it is also an essential step towards a ceasefire and lasting peace.
However, dispute between Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah sets Afghanistan up for a difficult political showdown at a critical time. US closing in on a withdrawal agreement with the Taliban should pave the way for intra-Afghan talks with the government in Kabul. But now, with two men claiming the presidency with powerful support bases, that vital stage in possible peace negotiations to end the decades-old civil war would be even more difficult. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus in mainland China reached a total of 76,288 and its total death toll is 2,345 and the global death toll stands at 2,360. There is a great concern about the spread of the novel coronavirus in countries outside China, with Iran reporting a spike in numbers and deaths and other Middle Eastern countries also reporting their first cases. South Korea has also seen a huge uptick in the cases with over 340 new confirmed nationwide cases. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization's Director General has said that the window of opportunity to control the outbreak is narrowing. China continues to struggle to gain control of coronavirus outbreak. In Wuhan's capital Hubei, medical facilities are still facing severe shortages in dealing with the surge in virus patients. China on Thursday said it has again changed the method of counting patients with the novel coronavirus, this being the second time in just 8 days that the country has revised its criteria. A move that could muddle statistics and complicate efforts to track the spread of the illness. Meanwhile, a WHO team of experts is currently in China to find answers to some unknowns of the novel virus disease.
A WHO-led international team of experts is now on the ground in China, working with their Chinese counterparts to find answers to some of the things we don't know, including the transmissibility of the virus and the impact of the measures that China has taken.
Meanwhile, the cases of virus in Asian nations has also spiked up. South Korea is the worst affected nation. The country's prime minister called it an emergency situation and asked for stepping up measures to contain the spread. The country has also locked down its military after several soldiers tested positive. The two southern cities of Daegu and Cheongdo have been declared special care zones. Daegu city's biggest cluster appears to be at a branch of religious sect. Daegu is China's fourth largest city and its streets are now largely abandoned as the 2 million residents are asked to remain at home.
The government will take special measures by designating the Daegu and Cheongdo areas as special care zones as the sudden hike in numbers of the confirmed cases have been reported from there.
Focus also continues to remain on the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which is the largest center of coronavirus outbreak outside mainland China. In total, 626 cases of the virus have been linked to the stricken ship, including 2 deaths. Passengers of the ship who have tested negative continue to disembark the ship after more than 14 days quarantined aboard. But there are questions being raised on the method of testing done and quarantine done by the Japanese authorities. This after, in the US, 11 of the 13 Diamond Princess evacuees who were taken for tested were confirmed to be infected. Australia too says that its 2 nationals who were evacuated from the ship tested positive after returning to their home country.
We carefully screened everybody before they left the ship, before they got on the plane and during the flight. But as people also know, there has been ongoing detection of infection on the Diamond Princess cruise ship over the last few days. So it's not unexpected that some people might have been incubating the virus.
Meanwhile, nations around the world continue to take measures to prevent the virus's spread. The fear of the virus spread could be seen in Ukraine when buses carrying evacuees from coronavirus hit China were attacked. Meanwhile, China says earliest vaccine for the coronavirus will be submitted for clinical trials around late April. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Fighting rages in northwest Syria as the Russian-backed Syrian government forces press ahead with a military offensive to push out opposition fighters from their last strongholds in the country. Turkish President Erdogan has warned of an imminent military offensive. Turkey and Russia back different sides in Syria's 9-year war and have accused each other of flouting a 2018 de-escalation agreement that allowed Turkey and Russia to set up observation posts in Idlib. The fighting is concentrated mostly in Idlib and Aleppo provinces, where freezing conditions are creating a grave humanitarian situation. Abdullah Muhammad and his family are living in a war zone. But they have come up with a unique way to cope with airstrikes. When his daughter Salwa became startled by loud noises, Abdullah used the sound of children letting off fireworks to show her that loud noises could be funny.
كيف ضحك معه؟ خزيفي كيف ضحك؟
Syrian troops supported by Russian warplanes have been advancing since December against the last rebel bastions in Idlib and Aleppo province, attacking rebels and jihadist fighters who have been trying to overthrow Syrian President Bashar al-Assad since 2011. However, Turkey is another player in this war. It backs the opposition to Assad and fears another massive influx of Syrian refugees. As a result, Turkey has deployed troops to observation posts under an agreement with Russia to set up a de-escalation zone according to the 2018 Sochi Accord. However, with government attacks intensifying, Turkey has threatened to retaliate, saying it is only a matter of time before it launches an operation. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan warned that he was determined to transform the border area into a safe place at any cost.
We are entering the last days of the Syrian regime to stop its hostility in Idlib. We are making our final warnings. Unfortunately, we have not yet reached the desired results in the talks with Russia.
Meanwhile, the Syrian government's offensive to flush out rebels has displaced some 9 lakh civilians, including 500,000 children, since 1st of December. Since 1st of January, UN officials have recorded the deaths of 299 civilians. The United Nations warns that if the fighting reached heavily populated areas, the human cost would be instant and huge. United Nations has called for an immediate ceasefire.
People are fleeing under horrendous conditions. Many are on foot or on the backs of trucks in below freezing temperatures, in the rain and in the snow. They're moving into increasingly crowded areas they think will be safer. But in Idlib, nowhere is safe. Almost 50,000 are sheltering under trees or in other open spaces.
In a separate development on Wednesday, the first passenger flight for more than 8 years between Damascus and Syria's second city, Aleppo, took place. The head of Aleppo airport saying that resumption of the flight was a result of the army's victory against terrorism. However, looking at the intense fighting in Idlib and Aleppo, it is clear that it will take time for peace to finally prevail in the country. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Libya's warring sides resumed talks in Geneva on Thursday aimed at brokering a lasting ceasefire in the war-torn country. The Libya's UN-backed government withdrew from the peace talks after capital Tripoli was hit by rocket fire by forces loyal to General Khalifa Haftar. However, the United Nations pushed ahead, pressing on both sides to come to the table and salvage the peace talks. Libya has been torn by a conflict since a 2011 uprising, which ousted a long-time strongman Muammar Gaddafi. Black smoke billowing from Tripoli port after it was hit by shell fire. The port being one of the targets struck by forces loyal to General Khalifa Haftar. The attack killed 3 people and almost hit a highly explosive gas tanker. This attack being a blow to the city of Tripoli that relies heavily on shipping to feed its population.
This offensive has been ongoing for past 10 months. And unfortunately, the international community is still trying to appease the other side. And this is what gave them the okay to continue what they have been doing.
It was not just the city of Tripoli that was hit hard by the attack. The UN peace talks also took a hit. Libya's internationally recognized government suspended peace talks, saying there can be no peace under the bombing. The United Nations also condemned the attack, saying it could have led to a real catastrophe had a nearby vessel transporting LPG had been hit. However, on Thursday, Libya's warring sides resumed talks in Geneva after United Nations pushed ahead for talks to resume.
While the situation on the ground remains a situation where the truce is very fragile, is often violated, where new attacks took place even today, in the very port of Tripoli, where incidents take place left and right.
The United Nations has been hosting in Geneva ceasefire talks between the two conflicting sides in Libya, namely the Tripoli government and the eastern-based Libya National Army led by Commander Khalifa Haftar. The two factions have been trying to take the capital Tripoli in a near-year-long campaign, displacing at least 1 lakh people. Top negotiations to broker a lasting ceasefire between the two sides in the civil war have faltered several times.
The situation on the ground remains deeply troubling. The truce is holding only by a thread, with over 150 violations reported, and it is the Libyan people that continue to suffer the most. The economic situation continues to deteriorate, exacerbated by the oil blockade and a looming banking crisis.
Libya has had no stable central authority since dictator Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown by NATO-backed rebels in 2011. For more than 5 years, it has had 2 rival governments in the east and the west, with the streets controlled by armed groups. In January, foreign powers agreed to shore up a shaky truce in Libya at a summit in Berlin, but the meeting was overshadowed by blockades of oil fields by forces loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar. However, there is more hope this time, mainly because of the approval of a United Nations Security Council resolution calling for a lasting ceasefire. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And here is a look at some more international news stories in Global Buzz. Tens of thousands of people attended vigils for the 9 victims of a far-right extremist who opened fire on 2 shisha bars in Hanau in Germany. The first target was the Midnight Shisha Bar in the city centre of Hanau. The suspect then travelled by car to the neighbourhood some 2 kilometres away and opened fire at the Arena Bar and Cafe. The suspect and his 72-year-old mother were found in his apartment, both also shot. Wednesday evening's attack is being treated by investigators as an act of terrorism. All of the victims were of immigrant backdrops and several are thought to be of Kurdish origin. Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar resigned on Thursday but stayed on as interim leader while the country's 3 main parties battle out coalition talks after an inconclusive election. Varadkar tendered his resignation as a premier to the country's president after the first sitting of Ireland's lower house of parliament since an 8th of February election which radically recast the political landscape. Parties in the 160-seat chamber convened and nominated candidates to lead a new government as premier, but with no one commanding a majority, it was adjourned till 5th of March. US President Donald Trump has promised to pardon WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange if he denied Russia-leaked emails of his 2016 election rivals campaign. The revelation came at a case management hearing at Westminster's Magistrates Court before Monday's formal start of Washington's extradition request for him to face espionage charges. However, the White House issued a denial that Donald Trump had dangled a pardon in exchange for help in the Russia controversy, which has cast a shadow over his first term in office. If found guilty in the United States, Assange could be jailed for 175 years. He faces 18 US counts. Billions of desert locusts have descended on East Africa in an insect storm of biblical proportions, devastating crops. The insects pose a serious threat to food security in the region, where up to 25 million people are already struggling to get enough food. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization is asking wealthier nations to take urgent action and calling for $76 million in emergency funding. The organization says that if these desert locusts are not reined in soon, the swarms could grow 400 times bigger by the beginning of summer. Experts say that a prolonged bout of exceptionally wet weather, including several rare cyclones that struck Eastern Africa and the Arabian Peninsula over the last 18 months, are the primary culprit.
From a distance, it looks like billowing smoke. But come closer and one can see swarms of desert locusts, devouring crops and pasture in the East African region. Kenya, Somalia, Eritrea and Djibouti are battling the worst locust outbreak in decades. And swarms have also spread in Tanzania and Uganda. Further, these swarms grazing land have also reached South Sudan, a country already reeling from widespread hunger and years of civil war.
We heavily depend on this farming season, beginning in April. We worry that locusts will destroy our harvest and we will end up remaining hungry throughout the rest of the year, waiting for October when we will have the next cropping season.
Somalia has declared a national emergency. Kenya has deployed aircrafts and Uganda has deployed soldiers to spray pesticides in the affected areas. The locust swarms entered Africa from Yemen 3 months ago. Desert locusts can travel up to 150 kilometers in a day and eat their own body weight in greenery, meaning a swarm just 1 kilometer square can eat as much food as 35,000 people in a day. the invasion is worsening food shortages in East African region, where up to 25 million people are suffering after 3 consecutive years of droughts and floods.
The problem we have in the region is that the planting season will occur very soon. It will start April, May in most of the countries. It means that if we are not able to control locust population for the moment, there will be a huge impact on the forthcoming planting season.
The UN has warned that a food crisis could be looming in East Africa if the outbreak is not brought under control. Efforts to control the locust infestation have so far not been effective. Aerial spraying of pesticides is the most effective way of fighting the swarms. But countries in the region do not have the right resources. The US pledged $8 million to help fight the invasion. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization has called on the international community to provide nearly $76 million to fund the spraying of the affected areas.
It's time for the international community to understand that it is an issue that needs to be dealt with now. Otherwise, we will turn a situation of a plague. There will be high level of acute food insecurity. There will be million more people that will require food assistance, and it will take us years to control this situation.
Experts say that the worst is not over and that the locusts, already in the hundreds of billions, will multiply further. They attribute the locusts' unusually high multiplication rate this year to climate change. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And finally, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Well, this is the motto of one Russian pensioner who has used around 2 tons of used bottle caps to turn her village house into an open-air art gallery. Since 2013, Nina Kiritsina has been creating her mosaic masterpieces, decorating her house in the village of Markai, around 850 kilometers east of Moscow. The amateur artist collects materials at a nearby landfill and uses daily donations from neighbors to support her hobby. So take a look at this Russian granny's artworks made of tons of plastic bottle caps. As I take your leave, I'll see you next week in another edition of World Panorama. See you then. Bye-bye.